Hi, I'm going to demonstrate just drawing a simple shape or two. Here's a cylinder. Got to get an oval. Notice I kind of feel for where I want the edge to be. Normally I would just draw another one down here, but if you're beginning, you may not be able to just eyeball that the two are the same. So you could draw a line straight down or use a straight edge and draw it straight down from, see how it's got to be connected here? It can't be here or here. It has to connect precisely where the corner is. But then you could also, if you bring those lines down, then your other oval comes in. Now the other important thing is whatever oval this is, so if this is the size of what you see at the top, the bottom is the same. So the incorrect way would be if this was your top and your bottom was straight, that would be wrong. Or if this was your top and this was your bottom, that's not correct either. Basically, if it's a cylinder, you're seeing that from the same angle. These two ovals should be the same. The distance from here to here is going to be the distance from here to here. You're going to lightly draw that in. I don't even know if you can see it on my drawing, but it's in there. It's light because I need to go ahead and erase it. Now, if this was a clear glass I was drawing, then I wouldn't worry about it. It would still show, but that's just the process. So I get this drawn. Again, this is the mechanical pencil I mentioned in the earlier video about tools. And so it's easily erased. So now I'm going to switch to an HB for the shading to get started anyway. Now, if I'm shading an object that's really complex, you know, I'm drawing a face or I'm drawing some object that has a lot of ridges and edges to it, then I'm going to start with like a 6B, not a 6B, an HB or a 2B for my shading. This, I don't really have to start that far out, you know, that tapered in, I guess the word would be. As we talked about the hardness, this is kind of middle of the road. For softness, I can get some darks with it, but it's never going to be as dark as that 8B that I showed you earlier. So generally you want to start lighter. You can always get darker. But on a simple object like this, I could go quicker to the darker pencils. But if you're unsure, always start lighter, and you can always make it darker. So, I don't quite like how I did that corner there. It's not really a corner, it's rounded, but so, alrighty. So we're gonna pretend this has a little bit of a lid to it too, or top to it rather, than it being inside. So I'm gonna, this is a 8B I have now. And I'm just lightening my pressure. One way to practice shading is to just make shading tornadoes, is what we call them in class. Do this. And just practice going from the darkest to the lightest and gradually layering until the light to the dark is subtle. You don't want this and then this. You don't want to see a line. You want it to be a gradual. That's called chiaroscuro. That's the type of shading that we're doing. There are many ways to shade. You could do cross-hatching. You could do stippling. You could do a very scratchy, you know, kind of thing like this. There are other ways to shade, but what I'm demonstrating is the smooth chiaroscuro shading. Now actually, this center where this light's hitting needs to also hit across the top of that can. Okay, and the top is always going to be a little lighter if the light's coming from above. So those are things that if you're drawing from what you're seeing, you're going to see that, and it's going to be easier than just making it up out of your head and deciding where the light is. I'm putting a little bit of a lip around there, like a can would have. If you were drawing a label, the label would follow that same curve. So that's just a basic little can. You'd pay attention to shadow. There might be a little bit of shadow underneath in the front. Even though the light's coming from this way, there might be a tiny bit. and then the shadow would go back in the line of the object. How far it goes depends on how low the light is. Just like you see how long the shadows get at the end of a day, that's how, you know, it might be a short shadow. It just depends on what you're seeing or what you're imagining in this case, because I'm just kind of imagining what this would look like. So I'm just going to pop a little shadow in there. It's not. Okay, so that's just a simple cylinder. So not too complicated, you know, maybe a little more dark over here and coming on over. We could use these shading sticks. I called them Shady Dudes earlier, but that's not their technical name. If you go to the store or you Google Shady Dude, who knows what you're going to get, because these are not, that's not the name of these. We just called them that in drawing class last year, and then the name stuck. So now we call them Shady Dudes. I'm going to, the back end is clean. So that's the thing. I don't always use these, but I'm going to demonstrate how you would use them. But they can, see how there's graphite on the shading stick, which is actually adding more graphite to my image. If you don't want that, then you've got to deal with it. Remember earlier I said you could use an eraser to draw out a highlight? So that's an example of that. Okay, so that's a simple cylinder. Now I'm going to, before we run out of time, an oval, or a sphere, I guess is the better word, is just a circle, but then it's shaded, I'm going straight to AP, it's shaded in the curve that the item exists as well. Just like we went straight up and down on that, we are going to go in the curve of this object. Now, I find it easier to turn my paper. Obviously, if I was working on something huge, I would have to contort my hand. But let's face it, if you're just doing some beginning things like this, you're not going to be working that big. So, again, side of the pencil, it allows me to get that in there. I'm varying basically how that tip is. If it's flat, it's all covering. If it's kind of leaning, then just the tip gets the most of the pressure. So it changes where the most of the graphite pressure is, which is where the darker area is going to be. So this has got to get a little darker. Okay. And a little bit crisper edge over here, I think. I want to be a little darker over there. It's starting to get more rounded looking. Okay. So these are fairly simple once you get kind of the hang of how they're supposed to, where the shading should be. Observe things. Just look at other people's drawings. The masters are a great example. Go look at Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo and Raphael and some of the old masters and their drawings. Believe it or not, Picasso, we think of his cubism. He was a very good artist. Look up some of his drawings. When he started out, he trained classically, and he was very good at drawing. He just had ideas that were much different. So there's a little bit of a shadow. There we go. And there you go. So play with it. Granted, like I said, I'm imagining, I'm not really happy with that shadow. I'm feeling like it should be flatter than that. So I'm going to flatten it out. It's okay to make mistakes and restart. I sound like Bob Ross, don't I? Happy little berries. The berry. Choo, 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 choo. Happy little trees. Yeah, no. Okay, so there we go. Hope that helped, and I'll do some more complex things another time.